Hey, party people! Welcome once again to the Party of One podcast, where the gaming table is always set for two. I am your host, as always, Jeff Stormer. This week I am joined by Nathan D. Paoletta for a game of One More Thing. One More Thing is designed to emulate primetime TV detectives like Peter Falk's Columbo. It involves a detective and a murderer spiraling each other and slowly unraveling a case until, in primetime TV fashion, the murderer is inevitably caught at the end of the episode. The prime mechanic of the game is not whether or not the murderer is caught, it is how the viewing audience perceives them. I super love this game. It was meta in all the right ways. I think you're going to love it. Nathan is, of course, the designer, among other things, of Annalise, Carrie, a game about war, and one of my favorite role-playing games, Worldwide Wrestling. He is also a publisher, currently kickstarting the game Trouble for Hire, a role-playing game of high-octane road adventure written by Kevin Allen Jr. Trouble for Hire sounds dope. There's really no other way for me to describe it. The way it works is there's one player character, Ruben Carlos Ruiz, a smuggler, courier, and wheelman through a magical realist action movie version of the American Southwest. Every other player is a game master putting Ruben through unwinnable situations and watching him excel with his wits, his cool car, and his big gun. It is currently on Kickstarter. You can find the link in the show notes. You should absolutely click it and check it out because it sounds so cool. Speaking of Kickstarter, before I throw it over to me in the past, there are two Kickstarters that are currently running that I really want to give a shout out to. The first is Acadecon. The RPG Academy's yearly convention is in their final week of Kickstarter. They're about 95% of the way there. It's a really cool convention. I'm going to be there for the first time this year, probably running Worldwide Wrestling. And it's gonna rule. It is a small con by design packed with podcasters and game designers and cool people playing cool, amazing games for a weekend. How do you beat that? Really, truly, how do you beat that? So click the link in the show notes and check it out. I'd also like to talk to you about Divided Pursuit, a multiplayer board game RPG in mobile form. Divided Pursuit combines bluffing games like Avalon or The Resistance with classic Dungeons & Dragons and the convenience of a locally played phone game like Jackbox, which are all things that I love, so I'm really excited about it. Each round, you'll assemble a party of adventurers to embark on a legendary quest, while trying to figure out which players in your group are saboteurs, trying to derail and undermine your progress. Whew! And on that note, let's throw it over to me in the past, so that he can get started with the show. Take it past me. Thanks, future me. This week, I am sitting down with Nathan Paoletta. Nathan, thank you for coming on Party of One.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm very happy to have you on the show. So real quick, at the top of the show, why don't you talk about any projects you might want the listening audience at home to know about, anywhere they might know you from, that sort of thing.
Sure. So I am a independent game designer and publisher. My main game at the moment is Worldwide Wrestling, which is a pro wrestling RPG. But I have a catalog of additional games in various genres. I recently did a 10-year anniversary edition of one of the first games I ever designed and released, which is called Carrie, a game about war. And that's about playing a squad of Marines in Vietnam, kind of like a Full Metal Jacket or Platoon style, interrogating the nature of war and whatnot. And by the time this comes out, I will probably be in the trying to get eyes on the project phase of a new project that's going to be coming to Kickstarter pretty soon. It is a game by Kevin Allen Jr., who is a friend of mine and another indie publisher, called Trouble for Hire, that I am releasing. He's done all the design work. I'm publishing it. It's a joint venture, and it's kind of a cinematic road movie heist adventure game that is able to be played with a very by people who aren't super into RPGs necessarily,
sure.
but are into action adventure, weird, phantasmagoric, magical realist desert madness. So
Literally every word on every adjective you added to that was another adjective that was on my list of like my jam. So I'm very excited to hear about that.
Yeah, it's really great, and you can find out more details about that. Again, the Kickstarter will be going live sometime in April, early April, hopefully.
Cool.
And until then, there's info on my website at ndpdesign.com, which is where all my stuff lives.
Cool. I'm also a big Worldwide Wrestling fan. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've had some tweets in the past about some wrestling stuff. So
I think we have.
Mm-hmm.
So this week we are playing, play testing a game of yours. So why don't you introduce us to the game we're playing this week?
Yeah, so I guess you're getting a good idea of the various spread of my interests. This game is called One More Thing, and it is primarily inspired by Columbo, the seminal 70s TV detective. If I need to explain to you who Columbo is, then that may just be a recommendation to go watch some Columbo.
This is true. This is true.
You're probably listening to this because you already are interested, I would say. But this game, it is a two-player game, obviously, where one of us will be the detective and the other will be the murderer. Mm-hmm. And through a series of it's not regimented in the sense of we do scene A, scene B, scene C, but we have a limited selection, as you'll see. So through a series of semi-structured scenes, we will be creating and discovering clues. The detective will be trying to put them together into a cohesive story that makes the case, while the murderer will be trying to cover it up and obfuscate what they had going on. However, it is not, I should say, the outcome is not in doubt. The detective will catch the murderer. The question is more, how does the murderer come off to the viewing audience? Because we're playing this like it's a TV show.
Mm-hmm. That's actually one of my favorite, reading it over, that's one of my favorite design decisions in the game, is that the murderer is going to get caught no matter what, because that is very Columbo. That is also very my Columbo, which is Mr. Monk. It's like you always know. You got the formula down. You know that it's going to end in him getting caught.
Yeah, we'll be leaning into the formula, right? Like that's fun, yeah. And then it's much more about the journey than the destination kind of thing.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive in. So I guess the first question is, would you like to play the detective or the murderer?
Well, that was going to be my question for you, whether you had a preference, because I can do either. The detective is more Columbo-y, while the murderer is more of a character that we come up with from scratch. So,
looking at the list of the murderer options, I'm kind of feeling like playing the murderer.
Right on. And also, the detective does a little more structural stuff, rules.
Yeah,
stuff.
So that might make sense for you to play that, so you can sort of guide the narrative action.
Cool. Then we'll do that. I guess one thing to point out / ask you for the format here, there is kind of a visual element where you're going to be tracking how the audience is viewing you on what's called the perception matrix, which is a little grid of boxes. What's the best way to... I have a copy here, and I assume you'll have...
I've got a copy in front of me as well, so cool. I will just keep track of that as we go.
Yeah, so we'll just keep track of it and maybe just make sure to note when you make a change on it for our listening audience.
Yeah.
Cool. And so if you're listening to visualize the perception matrix, it's tracking two things. How many clues the detective has committed, which means like this is part of my case, versus how much sympathy the murderer is racking up, which is kind of like, murder is always bad. You're always going to go to jail for it, but there are circumstances, right? Some people are more, it's a crime of desperation or it's a crime of passion and it wasn't intended or whatever. So you can be more sympathetic. And so that's kind of a stat in that way. It's really the only RPG style stat that the game has is the sympathy number.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. That makes sense. All right, yeah. So I've got I've got it in front of me. You've got it in front of you, and we'll just keep track of it and note it. Cool. So let's generate our detective and murderer.
All right. Well, the detective is pretty easy. You can either just kind of do like what I'm basically going to do for this game and pretend to be Columbo.
Good, great.
There's a couple little charts if you want to, generate a more original detective. Maybe that isn't directly ripping off of one of your favorite TV detectives, but in this case, I'll do my best homage without trying to pretend like I'm a Peter Falk level.
Talent borrows, genius steals.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm going to be rolling some dice to generate my murderer. The first thing I'm going to generate is what type of character I'm playing. There are 3 types. I could be a professional, a bizarre, or an aristocrat. I'm going to roll a 6-sided dice. I've rolled a 2, which means I am a professional.
All right. Yeah, so those are like the kind of social strata that you're coming from. All the murderer in this game is always of some kind of elevated or specialized social status, right? Because you always think you can get away with it.
Yeah. I'm always above the detective.
Right.
I'm always just a bee in my bonnet. So I'm going to roll a second d6. I'm a well-known artist. I'm very excited about that.
Oh, nice.
That's
Excellent.
A good one. That's a good one.
Cool. So you are a murderer is a well-known artist, and if you have some more thoughts about this character, you can use the nature of the crime, right, to guide your additional filling out details and background. Or if you have immediate thoughts, we can go ahead and talk that out.
I'm gonna make the murder, and we'll play it by ear. But I've definitely got an idea that it's I think it's definitely like a fancy art, a high art. It's a violinist or a sculptor or something like that.
Great.
So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm rolling. Okay, so there's 4 tables to roll on, a d6 table for each for the relationship between the murderer and the victim. Roll on that. That gives me parent and child.
All right. So well-known artist. So the first question is, are you the parent or are you the child?
I am the child. I have killed my father. Let's roll for emotion to see exactly why. 5. Revenge.
Was your father maybe undermining your career or taking or like did something to keep you from the success that you think you deserve or something like that?
Yeah, I think he was siphoning my income. I'm the parent-child thing. I think I'm a child star.
Okay.
I think I'm like a handsome 16-year-old. Maybe in terms of the meta narrative, maybe I'm like a boy, like a Jonas brother or something.
Oh, sure.
And they're like, you've brought him in. They brought him in to play like the child violinist star that killed his father because he was taking his money. And it's like the dark side of child stardom.
Nice. And so the motivation. So it's the revenge. So is it like he's the one who got you into this in the first place and then took all your money, basically?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He kind of pushed me into it. I was a talented violinist as a child. He kind of like pushed me into it, got me into all the fanciest schools, and then when I got famous, started managing me and taking my money that way.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to roll how much planning, and this is going to tell me how many times to roll 1d6 on the cover-up table. 5. It is a crime of passion. I'm going to roll once.
All right, so this was not a premeditated act. Something happened that brought all these frustrations and jealousies and anger to the forefront. Crime of passion.
Yeah. So we were. I think we were having an argument about it.
Yep.
And I just snapped.
Cool. Let's go ahead and see what the cover-up says, and then we'll.
Yeah. 3. I've moved the body. So, so I think what happens is I just,
What if it happened, like, on a location, like if it was at a production studio or a music or a recording studio or something. So like something that's not in obviously your house. So that part of the story is like anyone could have killed you, moved the body somewhere else, and
I bet it was. I'm gonna say it was at the record. I think the record studio or the record studio is definitely where it's at, like the recording booth. So it's like, well, any of these musicians could have done it.
Nice. Okay.
And I think that adds the detail that he was probably a manager.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably like a Berry Gordy type, so he probably has a lot of musicians under his.
Yeah, he was like some kind of label executive kind of person.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's really good. I like that a lot.
Cool. So there's prospective other suspects.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think sketching out the crime, we've got a pretty good idea. I think what happens is this is like the opening pre-credits shot is something like the two of us having the argument, me screaming about money, and he like turns his back to walk out.
Yeah.
And I hit him with the violin.
Exactly. I was like, is it going to be the violin? Yeah.
It's definitely like I hit him with the violin, and then maybe just to add to the whole the whole over the top TV symbolism of it, the string breaks on the violin, and I pull it and I start like choking him with it, and he's like fighting me, and it's a whole fight scene.
Yeah. Does the whole studio gets kind of trashed?
Yeah.
And then, when you finally step back and like we like hear the body fall, and then you come to your senses, right? You like look around and realize what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so from here,
sure.
I think we can transition into the formal scene.
Yeah.
It sounds like we have a good outline of what's happening.
Yeah.
So since you roll, just to start us off, on the perception matrix, you rolled a 5, right? For the, because it's a crime of passion. So you're starting off with 5 sympathy, is what that means.
Okay.
And right now there are 0 clues committed. So on the little table, you're just starting off in the little 5 box.
Got it.
Once a clue becomes committed, you move over into the larger square, which means that the audience is going to be seeing you as smart and desperate. If you start losing sympathy, then you're going to seem less and more detached or callous. And if I commit more clues, it's going to start making you look more scared and sloppy.
Sure. Now I'm seeing how this mechanic plays out, and I like it a lot. This is neat. I think my name is going to be Roland Axel. That's like a cool...
Yeah.
That's a cool teen musician name.
Roland Axel?
Roland Axel.
Okay. So obviously, this is your father's little music empire is Axel Studios.
Mm-hmm. Axel Records.
Axel Records.
This is already very good.
Well, hopefully it's... that means it could just all be downhill from here. We'll see how it goes. No, but this is good. This is a nice... this is feeling very correct to get us started. So, we kind of have the storyboard, right, for our first scene. So, do you want to go ahead and walk us through the scene as seen by our viewing audience? You already started doing that kind of naturally, but just so that we're...
So we open in the recording booth. He's playing the violin, and I'm just sort of moving the bow back and forth. But there's beautiful violin music playing.
Oh yeah, it's totally
doesn't quite match.
Yeah, it's totally fully overdubbed music. It's shooting you kind of from an angle where we can't see your fingers on the neck. Really. Yeah,
a lot of close-up shots on my face, just making concentrate. Yeah. And then I think I slip up one note, and that's when they cut to me actually on the bow. I slip up a note, and my father walks in. Chet Axel, record executive, walks in, and he starts screaming at me about, like, this is take 14, like, why am I sabotaging this record?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm screaming about, maybe if you paid me like a star, I'd play like a star, Dad.
Yeah. He comes back at you with, like, if it weren't for me, nobody would ever know who you were.
Yeah.
I made you. You do what I say.
And then he starts to walk out, and that's when I hit him with the violin, and it breaks, and I take the violin wire, and I start choking him, and we, like, hit the wall, and some gold records fall down and shatter.
Mm-hmm.
We knock over the microphone, and it makes a big feedback noise.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, like, his hands go limp, and I step back, and he falls back, and I stand there for a second.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, I'm going to go ahead and make notes on a couple clues.
Okay.
So how the game works is during this scene where the murderer is narrating how the murder goes down, we're each going to write down 4 things that we consider to be interesting clues for the detective to discover and then try to put together into this story. They're going to be their secret knowledge in that I'm going to write down my 4, you're going to write down your 4, and we're not going to know what they are.
Sure.
And would it help to talk about clues more, or does it seem pretty straightforward about what?
No, I think I got it. So the only thing is, you're writing down clues that you think will be interesting or tricky for me to explain away, and I'm writing down clues that will be easy for me to explain away. Right,
exactly. But they still have to be germane. Like, you can't write down things that aren't in the scene. Well, you can write down things that are implied by the scene.
Sure.
But you can't write down something that's a falsehood, right? Like, a clue wouldn't be, I was actually on a plane to New York, like, or something, which is just a lie, which is just not true. But yeah, again, the goal is to have interesting things to hang our interplay on. So I'm going to take a second and note down a couple clues that I think will be interesting.
I am as well. I need one more good clue.
I was going to ask, do you want to extend the scene out to how you move the body? Like how and where you move the body to? Because that's part of our intro.
I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. I think he falls over. I think I stand there for a second. I look around, and I move the body into... Okay, yeah, I move the body into...
Were you thinking of... Because it could be... Because, you hit him, right? So he's been hit with a blunt object. You could just, like, move him out to the alley and try and make it look like it was, like, a mugging or something.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense, because it's, he's been hit in the head, and he's got, like, strangulation, so I think it would make sense. That's what I'm gonna do. So he kind of drags him out to the alley. I think he, maybe grabs, like, a bike chain that's been put aside and sort of, like, puts it over his neck.
Right, just something to make it, like, not so obvious. Like, try and give some obvious explanation.
Yeah, okay. Now, so he puts him in the alley, he puts, like, a bike chain over or by his neck, and then just, like, runs off.
Yeah. What does he do with the violin? Or is it left unclear to our viewing audience?
I think it is left unclear.
Okay.
I think that we get a shot, like a close-up shot of him seeing his father, and then we get a shot of him, like, dragging him by the feet into the alley. But as to where everything is, I think that is up in the air.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, cool. So I have my 4 clues.
Cool. As do I.
Great. If we were, playing at a table, we would have them on little note cards, and we just turn them upside down and randomize them into a pile. Because when clues are drawn, they're taken out of both sources.
Right.
So we see the murder as our kind of pre-credit sequence.
I think as he's, like, draping the chain over, we like start to hear the opening strings of the theme song.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It goes into our little title credit sequence as maybe we see, I think so. We see Roland run off, and then we hear like tires, as he drives off. And then
all of this is a dramatic close-up of his father's face.
Exactly.
As we hear all that.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the soundtrack turns into like the theme is being played on violin, and then as we cut to the appearance of our detective, of our Columbo, pulling up in front of the studio where there's a big sign that says Axel Records, right? And when he turns off the car, he was like playing like a cassette of the violin music, that
I think in true Columbo-esque fashion, the cassette, you stop it and the cassette starts to overwind.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a moment where he's like fumbling with I don't think his car even really in canon, I don't think his car has a cassette player, but in our show, it does.
Yeah.
And he's like poking at it and like grumbling, and then when he pulls it out, it has all the long pieces of tape like that got all scrambled up.
Yep.
All right. Cool. So we're going to go into... so we had the murder. That's always the first scene. Now we go into the initial investigation, which is always the second scene. So now I narrate this one from the detective's perspective. So yeah, there's the little ironic moment of he's listening to this recorded music, gets all messed up, steps out of the car and kind of goes around to the back, to the back alley where the body was found, and it was already reported. There's a cop car blocking the other end of the alley with the lights. There's people standing behind it trying to see what's going on. I kind of fumble in my rumpled overcoat to find my ID because the cop on duty doesn't recognize me. Standard sure. Columbo stuff.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and pick a random clue that is going to be the first thing I notice. So I'm going to generate a number here. I numbered mine 1 through 4.
I numbered mine 5 through 8, so that works perfectly.
I picked clue number 8.
Perfect. Actually, this works out very well. Clue number 8 is strangulation marks on the neck.
Oh, yeah. So Columbo goes over and asks the sergeant, what happened here? Is this a mugging or something like that?
And I think he says something like, standard mugging, looks like he got clocked in the back of the head. Looks like they ran up behind him, clocked in the back of the head. Looks like they grabbed his bike chain.
Yeah. They take his wallet, take his watch?
No, doesn't look like it.
Huh. Well, that's weird. He gets down and kind of pokes around. He's like, anyone move this chain? Did anyone touch this chain? This is one that's like draped over his neck.
Right.
And
nope. Nobody touched it yet.
All right, good. He kind of picks it up and looks closely at the neck, and then gets up off his hands and knees and lets it drape back down. But the camera clearly saw that it's like the little thin marks. And he's like, so he still has his wallet, and the sergeant has the wallet and hands it over. And he flips through it, and then he starts going around. He's like, Chet Axel, I just saw something. with the name Axel on it, and he's asking cops and stuff like, what? Do you know an Axel? This seems like a familiar name. And one of the kids in the crowd, like one of the teenagers in the crowd, like, hey, mister, turn around. And he turns around and it says Axel Records in big, on a big sign on the back door. He gets his, so he goes in, and starts poking around. He finds someone to open the door because this is all late night, after hours kind of stuff. And we see him kind of walking around and poking through the trashed studio and kind of looking at things and pulling out going back out to the back and lifting the chain again. And yeah, that's our first investigation. We see our detective see that obviously this if this was a mugging, there's another element to it because he definitely was not choked by a bike chain.
Right.
So now we go into the back and forth different scenes.
Sure.
I pick the next one. So we each have a little play sheet that tells us the kinds of scenes we can pick.
Got it.
And so I think obviously we cut from here and we go to Roland Axel's pad, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What's his living situation?
It is a like a cliffside house.
Mm-hmm.
One of those really sleek like propped up houses on the side of the cliff. He's got a real big pool, and it's big glass windows, and inside it's all like marble tile. Everything is colored like black marble, so it's got that real sheen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just like gaudy, the kind of things that a 16-year-old would think are really high class. So like tiger sculptures.
Yeah, so like kind of over the top gaudy kind of ornaments and stuff like that. Cool. Are there people around? Does he have like hangers on and like servants and stuff, or is he more of a loner?
I think it's more of I think he's more of a loner. I think there are a few other like teens kind of passed out on couches and things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I think they're all from like a party that he was throwing last night.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's just the refuse of a party around,
nice.
And a few people passed out, but he's kind of on his own.
Okay, cool. Great. So, he's maybe the camera cuts to, we see him poolside. Just kind of staring off into over the cliff, and then like a doorman or something, like there is some kind of domestic servant who comes up and is like, "Mr. Axel, there's someone here to see you from the police."
And he kind of he's got the shades on his forehead because it's the cockiest possible thing to do,
right?
And he kind of just hits him with his finger, and they drop down over his eyes. Mm-hmm. And they're the big mirrored shades.
Yeah.
The aviators.
So we have a very 70s arty shot of the aviators come down, and then we see our detective reflected in them as he comes out of the house and comes out. And he's like, oh gosh, sorry to interrupt your morning, sir, but I'm afraid I have some bad news.
Is it about a noise complaint? Because I can just pay the fine.
Oh, no, sir. That's not my department. I'm afraid I don't really, it doesn't matter to me how much noise you make up here. I'm sure you can make all the noise you want. I mean, in a big house like this, I'm sure your neighbors don't mind. No, I'm actually from homicide.
Homicide? And he sits up a little, just a hair too dramatically.
Right. It's like, well, you see, has anyone, they told me that they hadn't been able to get in touch with you by phone, so I just decided to come up here myself. But it's about your father.
My father?
Yeah, I'm afraid that he was mugged. Someone attacked him behind the studio last night, and I'm afraid that he's dead.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
I'm sure you must be very shaken up to get the news like this. I'm sorry. But,
I'm very shaken up. I'm going to need some time to myself to process all of this.
Oh, I understand completely. But, there are a couple questions I need to ask just for my report, just so that I can get it out of the way and not have to bother you again about this.
Of course. Of course.
All right. So this is a interrogation scene where we have a conversation. I'm going to go ahead and look at 3 of the face down clues and pick one to turn face up. So I will roll this. I'll make this number pick and let you know if I need any of your clues.
Sure.
All right. So what are your clues 4 is mine. What are your clues 6 and 7?
6, I'll message them to you.
Okay. We'll preserve the mystery.
Yeah, make this good audio drama.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to scramble around our clues. I'm going to pick 3. I'm going to look at them. And one of them is jumping out to me as being perfect for this conversation. So I am turning up the clue that reads, it's your number 7, that that Axel's name, your character's name, right? Roland's name is on the recording schedule for last night.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just a couple questions for my report. Do you know anyone who'd have any reason to kill your father? Has he had any arguments with anybody recently?
Lots of people.
Oh, really?
My father, he was a manager, so he had, you know how talent is. They are a prickly bunch. He also was, I mean, I say this, obviously I loved him to, well, that's a bit morbid to say, I wouldn't say to death, but you know what I mean, I loved him.
Of course.
He was a prickly man, and he had a tough way of managing his talent.
So you'd say he had enemies?
Yeah, I could see any of the talent souring on him if they were pushed to it.
Do you don't happen to have a list of the musicians he was managing? Well, you don't happen to have a thing like that with you, do you?
On me, no, but there's probably you could probably find that at the studio. I think that he has he has his Rolodex in his office.
Oh, of course, you're right. I should have thought of that. The studio. Yeah, I'll check there. That's a good idea. And I guess, that's about it. Except, do you happen to know if he was supposed to be recording with anyone last night? It seems like it probably the coroners put the time of death pretty late at night. Do you know if he had like a late night session with anyone?
Well, I know I was scheduled to record with him in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
We had a recording from a new single. Sorry, I can't give you any details. It's a exclusive release, but after me, I think he might have had 1 or 2 other acts after me. But I mean, it's he liked to load up his days with as many recordings as possible. Mm-hmm. So anybody could have been hanging around.
Okay. So I see here. That makes sense. I'll see who else was there, but I did manage to I did get this from the studio before I came up here, and he reaches into his coat, pulls out a bundle of papers. Like, no, I need to pay that. Here it is. This was the schedule log for last night. And while he seemed like a very detail-oriented man, kept lots of detailed notes on his schedule, seems to me. And your recording session, it does have your name on it right at the end of the day, but no one's listed after it. Are you sure someone else would have been in there after you?
Well, maybe not. But like I said, I mean, there were, a lot of talent hanging around. I mean, it's a busy recording studio. Mm-hmm. 14 gold records.
That's definitely something to be proud of. All right. Well, I'll just follow up on a couple of these little questions. I'm sure the people at the studio can help me out. Sorry again to be the bearer of bad news.
Thank you for your compassion.
I understand what a blow this must be. I'll just see myself out, and then
that'd be great.
He's walking out, and then right before he gets to the door, turns around. He's like, "Oh, just one last little question. Was there anyone else in the studio with you during your recording session?"
In the studio with me? No, I like to work alone.
So it was just you and your father then?
At least in the studio itself. There may have been people in the lobby, but I need a pristine work environment.
Well, and I should have said so earlier. I mean, your work, my wife loves your recordings. I know.
Oh, that's so nice. And he he grabs a pre-signed photo and like kind of shoves it at you.
Nice. Yeah. Like, oh, she'll really appreciate this. I know we're a little bit out of your demographic, but you know, we just it makes her feel more youthful, you know, to be connected to someone who's has such, you know, so popular, does such a good work. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm gushing now. I'll get back to work. You have a good day now.
You as well, and send regards to your wife.
Oh, she'll appreciate that. All right. Cool. We'll cut the scene there.
Yeah.
Great. So I have 2 clues that I'm putting together now. Strangulation of the neck with the cord of some kind, and that your name was on the schedule, and don't really have an alibi for you at the current time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now it is your turn to pick one of the scenes that you want to do.
All right. I think I'm going to do a I'm going to do a rationalization scene.
Okay.
Which is just, I think the scene is by myself after the detective leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of pacing back and forth a little bit. And I'm by myself. Maybe one of the kids from the party, like, peeks in and is like,
oh, yeah.
Hey, Roland! And I'm like, get out. Just get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm standing, and the camera pans out, and on the bed is, like, dozens and dozens of bank receipts.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, management fees, and we see that it's, like, we get flashes of numbers where it's like, you were paid $16,000 for this job, or for this concert, and the management fee was, like, $9,000. And then, like, taxes and fees, and it says, like, final result, $423.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just this long shot, and it's just, we hear, over the soundtrack, we start hearing lines of, like, hey, management's a hard job. I take my cut because it's the right thing to do. Mm. I got you into this. And it's just, like, a quick soundtrack flashes of, like,
yeah,
all of
and
those.
It's, like, and maybe echoing some of the things from their argument in the first scene, mm-hmm. where it's like, I made you. I deserve everything that you make, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Cool. So this increases your sympathy by 1.
Yes.
Which is up to 6, which is the maximum. You've been so poorly treated by your tyrannical father manager.
Yep. They just they pushed me to the limit.
Yeah. All right.
I dare say anyone would do what I would do what I did in that situation.
Okay, so our detective is going to have a flash of insight.
Cool.
And this is something where I have an innocuous conversation or do something unrelated to the case or cogitate, and then suddenly realize a revelation, and this will commit one of our clues. Yeah, and I think it's simply that we're at the station. So mm-hmm. we're at, like, you know, our detective's desk, and it's all covered in papers and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And someone comes in and he's like, hey, hey, Lieutenant, we're going to go get some lunch. You want anything? Jimmy's just going to ride his bike down to the deli and pick up some sandwiches. And our detective's staring off kind of into the middle distance. He's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. His bike, huh? Wait a second. And then he grabs the phone and he dials a number, and, like, in the background goes like, Lieutenant, what do you want? Want me to get you tuna? They have chili too. And just ignoring him. And he calls and on the phone he's like, hey, yeah, can you connect me to the coroner's office? Yeah, hey, Fred. So you had a chance to look at those marks on his neck, right? There's no way that could have been like the bicycle chain or like a spoke or something like that. Uh-huh. Yeah, something really thin, right? Could something thin like a guitar string or a musical instrument? Yeah, really thin wire. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Right, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Fred. He hangs up. I'm committing this strangulation on the neck by wire clue being central to our case.
So, as there's one committed clue, that means the audience perceives me as smart and desperate.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
All right. It is now your turn for another scene.
Okay, yeah, then my scene is going to be a cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My scene is definitely a cover-up. That makes perfect sense. I think it is, it's late at night. Roland, we don't see that it's, we see a figure sort of smash a lock on the Axel Studios record studio, or the recording space.
Yeah.
And like a key opens a door, and somebody takes the smashed broken records. And slowly, and you see him put up fresh, brand new, pristine condition gold records in their place.
Okay.
And starts does that, puts the stool back up, straightens the microphone that had been knocked over into the the engineer's, the pane of glass.
And this whole thing, the door had police tape on it and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna add a new face down clue to the clue pile. I'm gonna replace number 7 with that.
Okay.
Since that was already gone or played.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna replace that with number 7, and I'm going to lower sympathy by 1 now that we're seeing that it's an active cover-up.
Yeah, now you're trying to get in there and confuse the issue. So you're still smart and desperate, but you're on the border.
And I think the end of the scene is that, we see all of that happen, and it's all, shoulder-down shots or close-ups on hands and things.
Yeah, so we don't see the face.
And the last thing that happens is we see the figure walk out, and it pans up, and it's Roland, looking side to side. Maybe he looks like he does. He slides his sunglasses down, and we see his eyes do the evil dart back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you know he's evil.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and follow that up with a good old-fashioned legwork scene.
All right.
And this is where we have a montage of our detective going to increasingly unlikely looking musicians. These are all different people who were managed by Chet. And at first he talks to someone kind of in the lobby of the studio, and he has the list of the recording times. And
I bet we get a lot of cameos in I bet this is a lot of cameos.
Yeah.
This is where they put in all the celebrity cameos, so for the commercial they can be star-studded episode.
Right. Yeah, so there are all these little cameos. So it's it starts off in the lobby of the studio, and then he's, knocking on the door of a beautiful penthouse, and it's, some much fancier kind of looking woman, and she's looking at the list and kind of shaking her head. And we're getting we're just getting a couple sentences of conversation, and they're all kind of oh yeah, he was tough, but he was fair. And, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have the career that I have. And, I saw him that morning, and, he was, he seemed like he was mad about something, but I don't really know what. And kind of just painting this picture of, all these other people who work for him, making him sound not terrible, right? And everyone's dismayed, and I don't know who would have done this. It's a tough industry, but there's no accounting for, this kind of thing. I don't know who would have done it. That kind of stuff. So I, again, look at 3 of the clues and pick one to turn face up. So, all right, cool. So we end up following our detective through this cameo series of appearances back to the studio, and finally he's talking to the the recording engineer who's there. And he's like, "Oh, hey, Lieutenant, are you guys all done yet? We need to, we have business to do. We have albums to record. We need to get back into our studio." And our detective's like, we need to make sure we've gotten gotten everything we need. And I'm just making sure that I know who was in this building all day. Actually, how long were you here? And they go through a thing about, how long he was there. But then Mr. Axel sent him home because, his kid always wants to have a pristine recording environment. Doesn't like anyone else to be around. But then he says, "But if you want to know if anyone else is here, we have the backup tapes, from the recording session." It's like, oh
no,
backup tapes. And sure enough, so the clue that I'm turning over is that there was a studio recording of the argument.
Oh no!
Dun dun dun. And it's like, the main tapes got trashed in whatever happened in there, but we have a backup deck that's just always on. It cuts off after a while because there's only so much recording space on it. And we dump it every couple days, but since we didn't record today because of you guys, we still got it.
That's good. That's very good. That's a good clue. All right.
Cool. So it is back to you.
So with that clue revealed...
Mm-hmm. So that has been revealed, but it is not committed.
Not committed.
Yeah.
So what clues are... I think what I'm going to do is... I think I'd like an interrogation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you come to me, or do you want to frame it just with the detective coming around to see you again?
I think the detective comes around to see me again.
All right.
Yeah, I think the detective comes to see me. We get that. We get a shot that is painfully similar to the one in The Graduate when he's in the pool.
Yeah.
He's floating, and he looks up, and the detective is standing over him.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, and so I start off with, I'm sorry to bother you again.
Detective, we need to stop meeting like this.
Well, you're an awfully hard man to get a hold of, on the phone. I could have talked to you on the phone, but your secretary said you weren't available. I understand that it's a tough time, but there are just a couple more little things that I need to ask you about before we can move on with the case.
Yes, no, please. Anything you can do to help find the man that did this.
Well, you see, that's funny. That's the thing. We looked all over that alley, and really couldn't find anything to tell us about who did this. It really seems like it was something to do. It happened in the studio, because otherwise, how else? There wasn't any other reason to. There isn't any other reason to think that he was just attacked out of nowhere. People don't kill each other for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Are you suggesting that maybe foul play was involved?
I'm afraid that at this stage in the investigation, yes, we do have to. We are considering this a murder. You see, the coroner's report came back, and while he was bludgeoned with some kind of object, the cause of death was in fact a laceration of the throat, as if he was choked to death with some kind of thin wire. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
That's horrible. No, I wouldn't. I think what I'm going to do at this moment is try to do a misdirect.
Okay.
I'm going to look at 3 face-down clues.
All right.
And I'll pull one up and use it to move the conversation onto something else and also kind of justify why I wasn't. Okay, yeah. So, you think it was foul play. So, do you think that it was it must have been a personal vendetta, or Oh God.
What?
I got a notice that I assumed was just part of the investigation or perhaps a government thing, but no, I think there's something afoot. That actually, and he kind of, we cut to him still in his, swim trunks, and the two of you are standing in this very ornate kitchen, and there's, like, a small pile of mail on a counter, this fine, like, onyx counter, and he pulls a letter out, and he says, I got a letter from my father's accounting firm that says that, the accounts were emptied out.
Oh.
They said that I assumed that the assets were just frozen for the investigation, or maybe they were trying to lay out his will, but maybe it was a robbery? Maybe somebody was trying to steal money from him?
Oh, that's very interesting. And takes the statement. It's like, we don't have any, like, the police don't have any ability to affect assets in this kind of case. Maybe if it was like a tax case or something, but this is interesting. So did you know were you privy to your father's account management? Did you have access to his bank accounts?
Oh, no. He kept everything very separate. As far as finances go, I was just, and my face hardens a little bit, another employee. So no, I didn't have any access into his accounts. I only got the letter, I assume, because they were looking into the will and wanted to let me know.
Oh, I'm sure. So all of this is all from your money then, from your recordings and your tours and concerts. You've certainly doing well enough for yourself here without needing his money.
Yeah. I do okay.
Oh, this is more than okay. This really, I don't know if I said this the first time, but your view, oh, it's amazing. But I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. Well, this certainly puts a new spin on things. Money could be quite the motive. I did do I talked to some of the other musicians under contract, and really everyone had pretty fair things to say about your father. I was having a hard time finding anyone who seemed angry enough with him to want to kill him. But once money like this is involved, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I think, I honestly, officer, detective,
detective.
I don't. I know musicians. I know the people that my father worked with. Any one of them would lie and to get a hand on that fortune. Okay,
well, this I'm gonna have to check this out straight away. Thanks again. Thanks again for your time. Hopefully, I won't. I've been enjoying our time. Talking to someone like you, it's always a pleasure. But hopefully, I won't have to talk to you again. And we can wrap this up quickly.
I hope that we talk one more time when you figure out who did it.
All right. And cutscene there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So now I have some more clues to work with. I have your name on the schedule. I have the studio recording of the argument, and I have your dad's bank account was emptied out or empty.
And my sympathy has bounced back up to a 6. The audience is loving me. This is right. An Emmy right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a star vehicle.
Right. Well, let's see. All right, my next scene will be an interview where I will conduct an interview with other people involved in the case in some way. And I think this is with his I don't know, like the vice president of the recording studio or something like this. Mm-hmm. Another mucky muck. We'll say that her name's Catherine Chess, and so our detective is meeting with Miss Chess to ask some questions about the business, tracking down this clue. and but he is specifically, asking about what the sales numbers have been for Roland's recordings recently. And like basically, yeah. So it's like, what have the sales numbers been like for Roland? Did it seem like his father was really anxious about that, or did he treat Roland differently than the other musicians, and this kind of stuff? And the upshot out of the conversation is that we get some of the backstory about how, you were his pet project from when you were a kid, and he brought you in, and you were this like violin virtuoso, and then turned you into this popular musician. But that the shine has started to come off recently, and your numbers and your tour sales were going down, and he was getting more stressed out about it, and that kind of thing. So so we deliver some of the exposition about your relationship in that scene, and also I get to add a new clue to our pile, which will go into my number 2 slot, since that
okay.
And maybe that scene just ends with him being like, could I just take a look at any of your records about his recording contract? I just want to make sure I have it perfectly clear before, because she's like, I can't, you don't think he's involved with this or anything, do you? And our detective's like, no, of course not. But I do want to make sure I have a clear picture of what was going on with the business, before, before moving on with the investigation. So let me, if I could just take a look at your files. And she's like, oh, of course. And has the secretary open a file drawer, and he starts rummaging through, and then we'll cut to your next scene.
So I think my next scene is, it starts the scene opens on like a pan of Roland's apartment, or rather of his house, and it pans around, and like we see all of the statues and the art, and we linger on what looks like a fire axe is like sitting on the counter.
Okay.
And we pan over a little further, and we see this beautiful shelf that's probably been in the background of some of the earlier shots of like instruments and like recording equipment, like all of the things that he uses to make his art at home. And it is all like smashed.
Oh no.
Visibly chopped to bits. And he is, and we pan over, and the whole time we've been hearing like sobbing noises. And we pan with the circle, like the sweep finally lands on Roland on the phone to the police. Like, someone broke in, and they broke my instruments, and I think whoever killed my father is just targeting our family, and I think there's some sort of vendetta. I think they killed and robbed my father, and now they're targeting me. And he hangs up the phone, and he's crying, and his face then immediately just goes blank, and the smallest grin tops up, and then the scene ends.
Nice.
So I'm going to add a face-down clue. This is going to take space of number 8 to the clue pile.
That sounds like you're lowering
that was a
sympathy.
Yeah. Oh, God,
by
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, you jerk. All right. So clearly, we're going to have another interrogation conversation. All right. So we cut to, pretty much immediately following on that. There's the cops are there. Our detectives there. Where the police photographers like taking pictures of the smashed instruments and stuff. And everyone's they're dusting for fingerprints and just, active investigation kind of stuff. And so our detective is coming over to you and saying, "I am so sorry for this damage. This just must be terrible for you."
And I'm wearing the blanket, and I'm completely hamming it up. And I'm like, thank you, detective. It means a lot. I'm glad that you could be here. I know that I just don't understand who could have such a vendetta against our family.
It really doesn't seem to make much sense, but that's the thing about the criminal mind. It doesn't follow a logical path.
I guess not.
So if you're up for it, I'd like to ask you a couple questions just about what happened here. Make sure that I know all the facts.
Of course.
So you were out and came home, or how did you discover the vandalism?
I was out doing some promotion. I had an interview. And I came home and the door was open. I had just assumed that somebody had crashed here overnight, but came in and everything was smashed, and it just looked like somebody really specifically wanted to send me some sort of message, like to get out of music or something.
And I know you must get fan mail, and there's weirdos out there. There's a lot of weirdos. Has anyone sent you any threats? Have you received any threatening messages recently?
Oh no, my fan mail has been all positive. People, the people love me.
And do you know anyone who would know that you have this collection here in the house? Because I would think that all these great instruments, you'd actually want them in your studio so you can, use them when you're recording.
Well, I mean, the studio instruments are for the commercial stuff. This is for, and he kind of stops for a moment and he goes, people would know. And he reaches along a bookshelf and he pulls out like a copy of like Us Weekly or some like tabloid magazine that's got a profile of him.
Oh, nice. And there's like the picture of them behind it, like he's posed in front of the wall of...
Yeah, and it's about his solo work, and so it's
okay, well, we'll just have the boys finish up here. We'll run prints, see if anything, if we get any matches. You never know. Sometimes you get lucky that way. I'll take a look outside. Do you feel comfortable staying here, or is there somewhere else you can go while this all gets cleaned up?
No, I'm gonna stay here. I need to send a message that I won't stand for this.
That's good. That's very good. I'm sure your father would be very proud of you for making that decision. He's like, all right, I'll just go talk to the officer. He turns around, and you're like, standing up in your blanket, and you're gonna go off to like, your bedroom or something and get out of the area. He's like, sir, just one more thing that I wanted to ask you about. I want to ask you about the backup tapes. The backup tapes?
Backup tapes?
Your studio,
sure.
How you, the recording engineer keeps a backup tape in case anything happens to the main tape.
My eyes go wide.
It's like, well, it turns out that while the main tape was damaged in whatever happened with your father, we're pretty sure it happened in that studio at this point. The backup tape, I talked to Steve, your engineer down there, and he was able to make me a copy. And I just wanted to ask you about this. It sounded to me, now I don't know maybe if this was a new kind of project you were working on, but it sounded to me that like you and your father had some pretty harsh words for each other during that recording session.
Things get heated, sure, but that's the nature of the game. The only person that I feel comfortable getting that harsh with is my father, because we're family. Oh,
okay. So he doesn't talk that way to the other musicians?
I mean, he's certainly rude to them. He's crass. He's rough around the edges, but we both know that we love each other at the end of the day, and that means that we can be a little blunter with one another. it's one of the joys of working in the family.
I understand. I'm always arguing with my brother-in-law about when he needs to bring over enough food for the barbecue, but that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to check on one thing that's on this tape. I want to make sure that I have this right, and then he reaches into his coat and pulls out like a little tape recorder and plays a clip that's the kind of like the end of the initial argument, where like your dad's like, I forget exactly how we had it go originally, but it's the part where it's like, I made you, and I made you, so I should get everything you make, and then there's a crash sound, and then it clips off. It's like, and that was the end of that tape. I just want to make sure that was your father's voice, right?
Yeah, that was him. Okay,
and that's the kind of argument you would have often?
Oh, sure. He took a rough cut, some not the most charitable cut of my earnings.
Oh, okay.
But so we disagreed a lot on payment. I thought my work I thought I deserved more of my earnings, especially now that I'm 16. I'm close enough to an adult that I should be getting more of my own money. I'm the one doing the work. He's not doing the work.
I completely understand. Well, he's not doing any work anymore. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. We'll finish up here.
I think it was uncalled for, detective. I think maybe you should leave.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Once the boys are done, we'll get out of your hair.
That'd be great.
All right. Then you storm off in your towel or in your blanket.
Yep.
Cool. So that is being
slam a door.
That is being committed. The studio recording of the argument. Back to you. So now that I have 2 committed clues, first of all, that moves you another step towards being scared and desperate, and not smart and desperate.
Yep.
And also, it means that now either of us can go to the final scene, the finale. Either because I want to bring it about, or because you want to confess.
Well, I don't want to confess. I want to go deeper.
Oh, no. Go deeper.
Yeah, I'm going deeper. I'm going to commit another murder to solve my problem.
But you were so sympathetic until now.
Not anymore.
All right.
What happens is we get a shot of Steve the engineer.
Yeah.
Wrapping up a day of recording. He hits the little button. He's like, great job, everybody. Let's wrap it up. We'll head home. And he saves all the tapes. He heads out to his car. He sits down and he starts driving home. And he's driving through the city. He's going to his little, 1-bedroom. And we keep getting these shots of this sports car, in the rearview mirror. We keep getting the shots of him adjusting the mirror, and the sports car's still there. And he turns, and there's the sports car. And he finally pulls over in his apartment. He gets out, he looks, and the car's parked right behind him. But there's no one in it. It's a convertible, but there's no one in it. And he's like, "What the?" And then there's the hand around his mouth, and we see Roland's face right in the corner of the frame, and he grabs him. Dun, dun, dun. We cut back, and he has been, we'll say, how do I want to murder Steve the engineer?
I mean, is he also strangled?
Yeah, I think he's definitely also strangled. Yeah.
Poor Steve.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. So I lose 1 sympathy, which sets me down to 4 sympathy. So now I'm smart and detached. Which makes sense, because I'm just willing to murder him, not because it's actively an active cover-up, but just because I'm angry at him. And I have the option to uncommit a clue, but I don't think I'm going to, because I don't think I have the ability to take the tapes out of the detective's possession.
Yeah, the 2 clues are still pretty relevant.
Yeah, so I think this is not an active cover-up. This is simply revenge.
I was just getting he's a revenge killer. Oh boy. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I have my last clue written down.
Cool.
I think I'm actually okay going into the finale.
I think I am as well.
Unless you had more that you wanted to get out there, but this feels like a pretty...
No, this feels like a good finale spot.
Time, yeah. All right. And in the finale, we have, we reveal and commit stuff, so there's a little more business to it also. Cool. So I think maybe we go back, we have a little interstitial scene where we see you maybe come back. We have an interstitial scene where we see you come back to your house and just like fall into the bed still with your, murdering clothes on, like your dark clothes or whatever you wore. And maybe you toss and turn, having trouble. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Do you have trouble sleeping after this, or do you like pour yourself a drink and, celebrate?
I think I toss and turn. I think I am... Yeah, no, I already know how, like, I can perfectly explain the loss in sympathy in the last scene. I got it.
Okay.
So I'm tossing and turning, and then, so it seemed like, I'm tossing and turning as though I can't sleep, as though I am disturbed about everything. But then finally I land on my back, and I'm looking up, and I'm blank-faced for a moment, and I just start laughing. I'm just laughing, and that's when I go and I pour myself a drink, and I'm still just like laughing, walking around my empty, beautiful like lakeside house, like sipping it.
Nice.
Maybe I do like a real obnoxious, like a spinny dance. I put the drink down and I grab one of the violins that isn't smashed and I start playing it real like recklessly.
Nice. Oh, you little sociopath. Nice. Okay. So we'll go from here into our finale. So in the finale, I both get to turn up a clue and commit a clue. I'm going to go ahead and turn up a clue first to kind of see what else, because that might drive how I want to frame the scene. All right. So we cut from the from you dancing around with this violin. And go to, it's the next day, and we see you pulling up to the studio in your convertible, and you go in, and there's like a secretary at the desk, and like, oh, Lieutenant COLUMBO is waiting for you in the recording studio. So you go in. And he's, and our detective is sitting in the studio, like sitting on the little stool, and holding, a violin. And we see him from behind, so we see his hand, like, holding the neck of the violin.
I think, I see that, and the first thing I say is like, oh no, you're holding it wrong, you're gonna...
Yeah. And he's like, he turns around, like, oh, I'm sorry. I just got carried away. I thought, I thought I'd just pick it up. I have no musical skills, but, you just make it look so easy.
It's years of practice.
So he's like, Mr. Axel, I think, I don't know if you heard the news, terrible news about, your engineer, Steve. I don't know if they told you on the phone. He was found dead last night.
Oh my God.
This whole vendetta against your family, it might even or against this studio. It seems like it's more about people involved with this recording session than anything else at this point.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's horrible.
All right. And he says, and you know what the funny thing is?
What's that?
The really funny thing is I don't know if you know anything about strangulation.
No. I know lots of things about playing the violin. Nothing about strangulation.
See, that's funny because usually when someone goes to strangle someone, they're mad. They're in a fight. and they use their hands. But in this case, in your father's murder, he was strangled with a thin piece of wire, like a violin string, maybe, or it could be something else. But gotta say that's just for the sake of example, or a guitar string, maybe, and that takes that takes dedication, using something like that, and then it turns out that Steve, he wasn't shot, he wasn't hit with a car, he wasn't hit with a pipe. He was also strangled by a violin string. And I don't mean like something like a violin string. It was this violin string, and he pulls out of his pocket the clue that I turned up, which is a violin string with blood on it.
I think you pull that out. I think Roland walks over and sits in the chair, or sits in the stool.
Mm-hmm.
One hand on his knee, the other hand just kind of dangling. He actually reaches up and he takes the violin from the detective's hand and starts just like holding it as though he's going to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Just tapping it.
Yeah. It says, a violin string's an awfully strange weapon. I don't know if you have any thoughts on how that might have happened.
It's a beautiful instrument, Detective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he gets up and he pulls up the, he goes and hits a few switches on the engineering thing, and the recording from the night of the murder starts playing. But it starts playing at the start of the take, where it's like the actual music is playing. And he starts walking around and he's like looking at the records, and he's just talking about, I first heard this violin music when I was 7. I was 7 years old. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard.
Is that when your father realized that you had a talent for this?
And that's when we all realized it. First time I touched an instrument, it was like it was a part of my being. It was like it was a missing limb that had been reattached. It was perfect. It was harmony.
Is that when your father realized he could make a lot of money off of you for his recording studio?
It was. It certainly was. You know, it was my father's first gold record.
Mm-hmm.
3 of the 14 were me.
It's an incredible achievement.
Nothing compared to the amount of money that he made. My house is very nice, Detective. You're not wrong. But I should be living in a castle.
It's hard to feel like you're not being recognized for your talents.
All the greats in their time weren't. But here's the thing, though. They knew. The people out there. And we're getting to, like, the crescendo in the song.
Mm-hmm.
He gestures. The people out there, they knew. They knew what I could do. They knew that I was a genius. The only thing was, there was this thing between me and what was mine. What I deserved. So it got in my head. I'm older now. I'm 16. I'm almost an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so what, am I going to live as an indentured servant to my father for the rest of my life? I don't think so. So, and he puts down the violin on the stool, and puts down the violin on the stool just when he misses the note.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he stops, and he's listening to the argument, and that's when he starts doing the dance that he was doing earlier.
And, our detective gets up and shakes his head and goes over and hits the tape deck so it stops playing. And he's like, well, you're gonna have to come with me now. I don't know how much more music you're gonna be able to make.
Every song has an ending. Every orchestral masterpiece has a final measure. I suppose this is mine.
And, and then and I think we just end there with, like, the camera on you as you're kind of looking off into the limited avenues of your future.
Yep. And so at that last scene, I'm going to drop my sympathy down to a 3.
Oh, you're going to drop it. Okay.
So, what do you think? Do you think it's drop or a raise?
Well, I mean, I can kind of see it going either way, actually.
I'm going to put it back up. That'll put me smart and desperate and put me squarely at a 5, and I think that feels right to me.
Well, I both revealed the clue about the bloody violin string and committed it as part of my finale. So I have 3 committed clues, so that would make you scared and desperate.
Scared and desperate.
Which I think makes sense.
Yeah.
Given the that context.
Yeah. So I think I am going to bump it.
If you go down one, you'd be scared and detached.
No, I think I'm desperate. I think that's the right word for where I ended it. Because I think I needed to get out of that situation by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, and so you kind of, confessed, essentially, and provided the last piece of the puzzle.
Yes, and that allowed me to increase or decrease my sympathy, which I'm going to increase it and be scared and desperate. Mm-hmm. And that's game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and roll end credits.
Yep. That game is super fun. I love that game.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Dang.
I was also prepared for a classic, if you identified the violin string, it was actually going to be the one from your that strangled your father and not Steve. I was like, I can bring this. We'll see how you roll with it. I can go either way. But
that felt like the right moment to confess, though. That felt like...
No, it was good. I mean, also playing on how young the character was, I think that made it a good place to end up. But there we go.
Absolutely.
That's the game.
Cool. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on Party of One.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll throw out just one final little plug. Well,
sure,
2.
Absolutely.
One is that this game is available to download for free from my website, from the playtest page. It is, I think it's pretty mechanically good. My main question at this point is whether people who are not steeped in COLUMBO can really approach it. So if people want to try it out with maybe their non-COLUMBO fan friends and report back, I'd love to get some information about that. But it is free to play for now. And also, if you love 70s television detectives, I have a podcast called 200 a Day, where I and my co-host Epadiah Ravishal, who's another indie game designer, go into deep dives on the Rockford Files, which is another seminal 70s television procedural with the wonderful James Garner as Jim Rockford, and we talk about episodes kind of like like a fan cast, but then we also break down the narrative elements and the writing and talk about how to use lessons from that show in your own games and stories. So that may be of interest to the gaming types out there.
That's super cool. That's cool as hell. So, anything else? Any other places people can reach you? Where can people find your work?
All my work is available through ndpdesign.com, my main website. I also am on Twitter at ndpaoletta. 200 a Day is at 200aday.fireside.fm. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/ndpaoletta, which funds stuff such as this. I was able to work on this basically because of the contributions of people backing me on Patreon. So doing smaller experimental games is kind of the goal of that project. So yeah,
that's
you
awesome.
Can find me at all those places.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to throw it over to me in the future so that he can wrap up with the show. Take it, future me. Thanks, past me. And thanks again, Nathan, for coming on the show. I freaking love that game. It perfectly captures everything that I love about primetime detective shows. It's really well done. It is a really well done game. For more information about One More Thing, you can head to ndpdesign.com. It is available as a free playtest. While there, you should check out Nathan's other games because, point blank, he makes freaking amazing games, and there's no other real way to put that. You can check all that out at ndpdesign.com. Speaking of things to check out, Trouble for Hire, currently on Kickstarter, sounds amazing, and I'd love to see it funded. You can click the link in the show notes for that as well. Finally, you can follow Nathan on Twitter at ndpaoletta. Speaking of Twitter, you can follow this show at Party of One Pod, like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/partyofonepodcast. If you love the show, consider leaving us a nice iTunes review, a social media shout-out, or a word-of-mouth recommendation. All three of those things help the show reach new audiences and grow bigger, better, and cooler by the day. You can also consider backing us on Patreon at patreon.com/partyofonepodcast. Patreon is a powerful and tangible way to support the show. It helps cover hosting fees, equipment costs, con budgets, and more, and I really appreciate your support, so thank you. And if you want to hear more from me, check out All My Fantasy Children, the podcast in which Aaron Catano and I take your listener prompts and turn them into beautiful, thriving, vibrant role-playing game children. That can be found at soundcloud.com/allmyfantasychildren. Party of One is produced and edited by Jeff Stormer and Jen Frank. Opening and closing credits for the show come from the song Infinite Lives by Mega Ran featuring the D&D Sluggers. Violin music for the show comes from the song Violin Partition No. 1, written by Johann Sebastian Bach, performed by John Garner. If you'd like to inquire about advertising rates coming onto the show, or you'd like to hear my latest Ribbon Drive mixtape, shoot me an email at partyofonepodcast@gmail.com. That's it for me. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Remember to fight the forces of fascism every single day. And party on.